The millionaire lived surrounded by luxury, but was unaware of the pain hidden within his own home. When he discovered that his daughter hadn't eaten for days, the ground vanished beneath his feet. Then the maid, driven by a love that defied everything, did the unimaginable to save the girl. If you enjoy emotional stories, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Continuing. Now, Chapter 1. The Silence of Clara. The alarm clock blared at 4:30 in the morning, as it always did. Helena Rodriguez reached out a calloused hand and silenced it before it could wake the boys. In the small room next door, 6-year-old Peter and 8-year-old James were still asleep, bundled in colorful blankets she had stitched herself during sleepless nights. The 2-room apartment in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles, awoke with the smell of strong coffee she brewed while rubbing her eyes. Through the window she saw the still dark dawn and the points of light that signaled other lives also waking far too early. Just another day, she whispered to herself, picking up the worn notebook she had inherited from her mother. Its yellowed pages held more than recipes. They held memories, moments, a piece of the essence of Mama Rose, who had passed away 3 years ago, leaving her daughter not just the recipes, but the responsibility of raising her grandsons alone. Eleanor flipped through the notebook as the coffee brewed, stopping at the page for butter cookies. She smiled. Those cookies had the power to turn bad days into bearable ones. Her phone buzzed. A message at 5 in the morning was never good news. It was Regina, her friend who worked as a housekeeper in one of the Calabasas mansions. "Ellie, I need you, emergency. Family is looking for someone to cook for a sick child. They pay really well. Call me." Elena felt her heart race. The money she earned as a cleaning lady barely covered the basic bills, and the boys' school fees were going up next month. She couldn't afford to waste an opportunity. She called immediately. "The girl hasn't eaten in 5 days, Regina explained, her voice low as if sharing a secret. "The doctors have tried everything. The mother is desperate, the father even more so. They need someone who understands food for children, who has experience with kids. But I'm not a chef, Regina. I just know how to cook like a mom." "That's exactly what they need." Ellie, a mom's cooking. 3 hours later, Eleanor stepped off a bus at the stop nearest the luxury-gated community, still feeling out of place in her simple clothes. Carrying the worn recipe notebook in her frayed bag like a talisman, she walked another 20 minutes to the main gate, where a security guard eyed her up and down before letting her in, after a call to the Vance residence. The mansion looked like something out of a movie. 3 stories of concrete, glass and steel, with immaculate gardens and a pool that reflected the sky like a blue mirror. Regina was waiting for her at the service entrance. "Ellie, you came. Thank God the situation is worse. The girl barely even opens her eyes now. What happened to her?" Regina shrugged nervously. "Nobody knows for sure. The doctors talk about dehydration, possible childhood depression, trauma, but no one can pinpoint a diagnosis. Clara just stopped eating, talking, reacting." Elena felt a chill. "Clara, is that her name?" "Clara Vance, 2 years and 4 months old, the couple's only child." Regina led her through marble corridors, past rooms decorated with furniture that looked like it had never been used. Abstract paintings on the walls cost more than Elena would earn in years of work. The contrast with her small apartment couldn't be starker. Felicity, Clara's mother, is famous, a digital influencer, you know, millions of followers. She talks about motherhood, healthy living, fitness. The husband is Edward, owns a tech company. "Hey, they look perfect in the photos." Regina lowered her voice. "But behind closed doors it's a different story." Before she could elaborate, they were interrupted by a slender woman with perfectly straightened hair and flawless makeup, despite the hour. She was wearing expensive leggings and a gym top, as if she had just come from a photo shoot. "Regina, is this the cook you mentioned?" Felicity Vance's voice was polite but distant. Her blue eyes, enhanced by contact lenses, scanned Elena from head to toe. "Yes, ma'am. This is Elena Rodriguez. She's a mother of 2 boys, a wonderful cook, and has experience with difficult children." "I should hope so. We've tried everything with Clara. The doctor suggests some emotional trauma, but that's ridiculous. Clara has always had the best of everything." Felicity started walking, indicating they should follow. As they walked, she pulled out her phone and started recording. "Hey, my loves. Tough day over here, but we never give up, do we? I've just hired a new chef specializing in child nutrition to prepare organic, functional meals for our little princess. Elena exchanged a look with Regina. Specialized chef? Child nutrition? The lie flowed so naturally from Felicity's perfect lips that it was almost believable. Because mental health starts with what you eat, people. Remember to check my link in bio for the ebook, Perfect Mom, Happy Child. Felicity turned off the camera as they reached a bedroom door. Her face, animated just a moment ago, returned to its tense expression. A few rules: no sugar, refined flour, dairy, or processed foods. Clara has been on a strictly vegan and gluten-free diet since birth. There's a whole protocol developed by the best nutritionists. Elena nodded, though she felt something was wrong. What 2-year-old had such a restrictive diet? Her room has cameras. For security, of course. And so I can share special moments with my followers. When the door opened, Eleanor's heart ached. The room was enormous, decorated in shades of pink and white, with furniture that looked like it was straight out of a design catalogue. Imported toys were arranged by size and color. Everything was perfect, except for the small figure in the bed. Clara lay there, her eyes half closed, so pale she almost blended in with the white sheets. Her blonde hair, fine as silk, was spread across the pillow. So small, so fragile. Felicity approached and adjusted the pillow, more for the invisible camera Eleanor sensed was there than out of real concern. There was no kiss, no hug, no words of endearment. The doctors come twice a day. She's been on an IV drip to keep her from dehydrating completely. Your job is to prepare something, anything that she'll accept, within the restrictions I mentioned. Eleanor slowly approached the bed. Something about the child reminded her of her Peter when he had pneumonia at age 3. That distant look, as if she were hiding somewhere deep inside herself. May I stay with her for a bit? Just to get to know each other? Felicity checked her watch, impatient. I have a live stream in 20 minutes on how to handle maternal challenges with serenity. Regina will show you the kitchen afterward. When the door closed, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed. The room was too quiet. There was no laughter, no music, no mess, things that should be part of a child's world. Hi, Clara, she said in a soft voice. I'm Ellie. I've come to keep you company for a little while. No response. The girl's eyes remained fixed on the void. Eleanor began to hum the lullaby that always calmed her sons. Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. The simple melody filled the sterile room. She didn't expect an immediate response. She just wanted Clara to know she wasn't alone. That's when she noticed it. In the corner of the perfect room, there was a single thing out of place, a small, worn-out stuffed rabbit, partially hidden under the dresser. Elena picked it up and brought it to the little girl. Look who I found. It seems like he was hiding. She placed the toy near Clara's hand. For an instant, so quick she almost missed it, the girl's fingers twitched, as if wanting to touch the rabbit. It was enough for Elena to know that Clara was still in there somewhere. The following days followed a pattern. Elena prepared delicate soups, colorful purees, all within the restrictions imposed by Felicity. Clara barely touched the food. Edward, the father, appeared rarely, always on the phone, always in a hurry, though his eyes showed genuine concern when he looked at his daughter. On the third night, Eleanor was clearing away the untouched food when she heard a faint sob. Clara was crying, a silent cry that seemed to come from far away. The stuffed rabbit was clutched tightly to her chest. That night, while the house slept, Elena made a decision. In the mansion's small industrial kitchen, she opened her recipe notebook. The page for Mama Rose's butter cookies was stained with grease and the fingerprints of 3 generations. To heal the soul, read the note at the top, in her mother's neat handwriting. She found butter hidden in the back of the fridge, probably used by the staff since the family was on a vegan diet. There was sugar in Regina's cabinet. Flour, vanilla extract, a pinch of cinnamon. The forbidden ingredients were mixed with the affection that was nowhere to be seen in that house. As the cookies baked, Eleanor thought of her sons, her small apartment, the bills. If she lost this job, she'd be back to square one. But there was something more important than the salary. There was a child disappearing before her very eyes. The smell of butter and vanilla filled the kitchen. When the cookies were ready, golden with slightly crispy edges, she placed them on a plate and went up to Clara's room. She had nothing left to lose. The little girl was awake as if she couldn't sleep either. Elena sat beside her. I brought something special, Clara. It's my mom's recipe, which was her mom's before her. Do you know what my mom used to say? That these cookies have a little bit of magic in them. They help us remember that there's sweetness in the world, even when everything seems sad. Clara looked at the plate. Her eyes for the first time seemed focused on something. No, one will know our secret. Just you and me. Elena picked up a cookie and took a bite, making a sound of approval. Then she offered another to Clara. For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the small hand reached out. Fragile fingers took the cookie. Clara brought it to her mouth and took a tiny bite. Time seemed to freeze as, after chewing slowly, Clara swallowed. Her eyes lifted to meet Elena's, and then it happened. A small, almost imperceptible smile. Good? Elena asked, tears in her eyes. Clara nodded, and then, in a whisper so quiet it was almost lost in the silence of the room, more. One word. A single word after days of silence. Elena had to fight the urge to hug her. She offered another cookie, which was accepted with more confidence. Neither of them noticed the door opening, nor the male figure standing in the doorway, watching the scene with wide eyes. Clara? Edward Vance's voice broke the spell of the moment. Elena turned, startled, the plate of forbidden cookies like evidence of her disobedience. She prepared to be fired, to be kicked out. But Edward wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, who was holding a half-eaten cookie and looking back at her father. Clara held out her arm, offering the cookie to him. Papa. Edward dropped to his knees beside the bed. His hands trembled as he touched his daughter's face. You spoke. My God, you spoke. His voice cracked. He took the offered cookie and took a bite, as if it were the food of the gods. It's delicious, Princess. Elena tried to slip away discreetly, but Edward stopped her with a gesture. What did you do? How did you? She hesitated. They're just cookies, sir. My mother's recipe. I know it's against the house rules, but... Rules? Edward let out a bitter laugh. My daughter wasn't eating, wasn't talking, wasn't living. And now? He looked at Clara, who was slowly chewing another cookie as if savoring every crumb. Now she's here. The moment of celebration was short-lived. The click of heels in the hallway announced Felicity's arrival. Edward stood up quickly as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. What is going on in here? I smelled... Felicity stopped when she saw the plate of cookies. Her beautiful face twisted into a mask of fury. What is this? Are you giving my daughter sugar and gluten? Elena stood her ground. Ma'am, she ate. And she spoke. Now, Edward, did you allow this? Felicity ignored the information, focusing only on the transgression. Flick, listen, Clara spoke. She called me Papa. It's a miracle. A miracle? This, Felicity pointed at Elena, not even bothering to say her name. This woman disobeyed medical orders. She put Clara's health at risk. But she's responding. Look at her. Edward gestured to his daughter, who was now sitting up in bed, something she hadn't done for days. That's when Clara held out her arms to Elena, a silent request to be held. Without a second thought, Elena picked her up, feeling the small warm body against hers. Clara rested her head on her shoulder. Put my daughter down right now. Felicity's voice cut through the air like a blade. You're fired. Get out of my house immediately. Felicity, for God's sake, Edward tried to intervene. No, we've had enough doctors agree with me about Clara's diet. I will not allow this cleaning lady to ruin all our work over some cookies full of junk. Clara clung tighter to Elena, as if she understood she was about to lose this connection. Edward, Felicity turned to her husband, her voice suddenly sweet, calculated. Honey, do you really want to risk Clara's health? What if she has an allergic reaction? What if she gets worse? You'll feel guilty for the rest of your life. The manipulation was clear but effective. Edward hesitated, looking from his daughter to his wife. Years of conditioning took effect. Maybe you're right. We can't risk it. Elena felt a lump in her throat. Gently, she placed Clara back on the bed, feeling the little hands trying to hold on to her. I'll get my things, she said with dignity. As she gathered the few things she had brought, she heard Clara begin to cry in the bedroom. Not the silent cry from before, but a real audible, desperate wail. The sound broke her heart. Regina found her in the kitchen. Ellie, what happened? I heard shouting. I was fired. I gave Clara cookies. She ate. She talked. She even asked to be held. But Felicity flipped out. Regina shook her head. "Oh, Ellie, you don't understand. It's not about the food. It never was." "What do you mean?" "Say Felicity has built a perfect image. The perfect mother, the perfect family, the perfect diet. Millions follow her, buy her products, her courses. If Clara gets better by eating regular cookies made by a housekeeper, where does that leave her narrative?" The truth hit Elena like a slap. It wasn't about health, but about control and appearances. About maintaining a facade that was worth millions in sponsorships and influence. "Regina, there's something very wrong in this house." "I know," the housekeeper whispered. "I've always known, but I need this job." On her way out, Elena crossed paths with Edward. He looked conflicted, like a man trapped between two worlds. "I'm sorry," he said, handing her an envelope. "Your payment with a bonus. Please understand." She refused the envelope. "I don't want your money, Mr. Vance. I want you to understand one thing. Your daughter isn't sick." She's sad, deeply sad. And money can't cure that. She walked out into the cool night, leaving behind the illuminated mansion where a child had just found her voice, only to lose it again. In her pocket, she carried the recipe notebook and, hidden between its pages, the small stuffed rabbit that Clara had slipped in there when no one was looking, as if she knew they would have to part, as if giving her a piece of herself to keep. On the way to the bus stop, Elena looked up at the stars dimmed by the LA smog. "Mom," she whispered to the sky, "help me do the right thing." What she didn't know was that when she got home, she would find dozens of notifications on her phone. Felicity Vance had posted a video, already with millions of views, accusing an irresponsible employee of putting her daughter's life at risk. The internet was buzzing with hateful comments directed at a woman whose name hadn't even been mentioned, but whose description made it clear who it was. The war was just beginning. And on the other side of the city, in her princess bedroom, Clara was once again closing herself off in silence, hugging the emptiness left by the stuffed rabbit that was now in Elena's pocket. Chapter 2. Revelations. 2 days after Elena's dismissal, the rain lashed against Los Angeles with a fury typical of a summer storm. In her small apartment, she watched the thick drops run down the window pane while her son slept, exhausted after a day at school. On the TV, turned down low, a host was talking about the case of the influencer and the nanny who almost killed her daughter. The distorted story that was, spreading like a virus across social media, and had now reached the news. Ellie sighed, turning off the set. The last 48 hours had been a nightmare. Without revealing her name, Felicity had turned her into a national villain. On social media, the hashtag #WhoIsTheMonsterNanny was trending. People shared absurd theories, some even claiming she had intentionally poisoned the girl. The internet was thirsty for blood, and Elena was the perfect offering. Her phone vibrated. A message from Regina. "Clara's worse. She's at Cedars-Sinai. Edward is devastated." Elena's heart clenched. She picked up the small stuffed rabbit she kept by her bed and stroked it, thinking of the little girl. The worn toy, with a mended ear and stains from use, seemed to carry the weight of Clara's sadness. On impulse, she took a photo of it and sent it to Regina. "This rabbit is important to her. Please tell Edward." Across the city, in the luxurious private hospital, Edward Vance faced renowned doctors who, once again, had no definitive answers. Clara had stopped eating completely, refused to open her eyes, and was showing signs of severe dehydration despite the IV. "Mr. Vance, we are considering the possibility of a feeding tube," the pediatrician explained, with the delicacy of someone delivering bad news. "Your daughter's psychological state appears to be affecting her basic physiological functions." Edward ran his hands through his hair in despair. Felicity wasn't there. She had claimed an unavoidable commitment with sponsors, promising to arrive as soon as possible. Deep down, he knew she was probably in some studio, recording content about how to maintain serenity in difficult times. His phone rang. It was Regina, sending a photo of an old stuffed rabbit. The message read, "Mr. Vance, Elena sent this. She says it's important for Clara." Edward frowned, confused. He had never seen that toy before. Clara had dozens of expensive, collectible, imported stuffed animals, all pristine, perfectly lined up on shelves. This shabby rabbit didn't belong in the immaculate magazine perfect room. "Doctor," he called to the physician still reviewing test results. "This toy, could it be important?" "Transitional objects are crucial for young children," the doctor replied, adjusting his glasses to see the photo. "They provide emotional security, especially in times of stress." Edward fell silent, processing the information. He remembered the moment he saw Clara eating the cookie, talking. The contrast between that scene and his daughter's current state was devastating. Something was deeply wrong, not just with Clara, but with everything around him. He made a decision. He called his head of security. "Marcus, I need you to investigate someone for me, with absolute urgency and discretion." The next morning, while making coffee for her sons, Elena was startled by firm knocks on the door. Her heart leaped. The online accusations made her afraid to even step outside. Cautiously, she approached and looked through the peephole. A man in a suit, with a serious expression, was waiting outside. "Ms. Elena Rodriguez, I'm Marcus Thorne, head of security for Mr. Edward Vance. He requests your presence at the hospital. It's about Clara." The initial fear gave way to concern. "Is Clara worse?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Vance believes you can help." Elena looked at her sons, who were eating quietly, watching the scene with curious eyes. She felt torn between her responsibilities as a mother and her worry for Clara. "My sons, everything has been arranged. Your neighbor, Mrs. Sonia, has agreed to stay with them. Mr. Vance has ensured she will be well compensated for the favor." The efficiency with which her life had been organized to allow her to go to the hospital was a little frightening. It demonstrated both Edward Vance's power and his desperation. An hour later, Elena was walking through the sterile corridors of the elite hospital, holding the stuffed rabbit like a talisman. The contrast between her simple jeans and t-shirt and the luxurious environments she had been frequenting in recent days did not go unnoticed. She felt the stares, imagined the judgments. Edward was waiting for her in the restricted area of the pediatric ICU. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Deep dark circles, an unshaven face, wrinkled clothes, nothing like the polished businessman who appeared in magazine photos next to his perfect wife. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. "She's not responding to anything. The doctors are talking about transferring her to the psychiatric ward." "Where is your wife?" Eleanor asked, unable to hide the implicit criticism. "Doing a live stream on maternal resilience," he replied bitterly. "Come, the doctors have allowed you to visit. I explained that you made a connection with Clara." The hospital room, despite its private luxury, had that aura of sadness that no decor can disguise. Clara was connected to monitors, a tiny needle fixed in her arm for the IV. She looked even smaller and more fragile against the white sheets. Elena approached slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed. She felt Edward watching her every move, like someone clinging to a last thread of hope. "Hi, Clara," she whispered. "I brought someone who was missing you." She placed the stuffed rabbit next to the girl's pale face. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep, Clara opened her eyes. Her little fingers moved, touching the worn fur of the toy. Her lip trembled slightly. "You know," Elena continued in a low voice, "your bunny told me he's very sad without you. He said he can't sleep well, that he misses your stories." A soft sigh escaped Clara's lips. "And you know what else he told me? That he has a little secret. That only you and he know. A special place just for the two of you." Clara turned her head slightly, her eyes now focused on Elena. "That's right, sweetie. Your secret place. Do you want to show Ellie where it is?" The little girl moved her lips without a sound. Elena leaned closer. "Closet," Clara whispered, so faintly it was barely audible. Edward moved closer, incredulous. "She spoke. What did she say?" "Closet," Elena repeated. "Clara, which closet, sweetie?" "My room," the weak voice answered. Edward was already on the phone. "Regina, I need you to go to Clara's room. There's a closet there. Yes, look for something, a hiding place maybe. Something important to her." While they waited, Elena continued to talk softly to Clara, telling, Stories about the rabbit, inventing adventures it had lived while they were apart. The girl didn't speak again, but her eyes remained open, attentive. 20 minutes later, Edward's phone rang. Regina's agitated voice came from the other end. "Sir, I found it. At the back of the clothes closet, there's a small space between the baseboard and the wall." Clara was hiding things there. "What things, Regina?" "A package of store-bought cookies, some photos, and a very old baby outfit." Edward frowned, confused. "Photos? What photos?" "Of Clara with an older woman. I don't recognize her. I've never seen her at the house." Edward's face turned pale, as if a piece of a puzzle had finally clicked into place. "Regina, can you send those photos to my phone? And there's one more thing. I need you to check a folder in my office. It's in the safe. The password is Clara's date of birth." While he waited, Edward seemed agitated. He paced the room, repeatedly looking at his daughter, who was now hugging the rabbit more tightly. "Who gave her the rabbit?" Elena asked, intrigued. Edward shook his head. "I don't know. I've never seen it before. Felicity controls all of Clara's toys. Everything has to be educational, aesthetic, compatible with the family brand." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. The phone buzzed again. Edward looked at the received photos, and his face transformed. First surprise, then something that looked like anger, and finally a deep sadness. "It's Constance," he murmured, more to himself than to Elena. "Who?" "Clara's first nanny. She took care of her from when she was a newborn until she was a year and a half. Felicity fired her after." "After what?" Edward hesitated, as if treading on dangerous ground. "After she caught her feeding Clara normal food, homemade baby food, instead of the imported organic purees Felicity demanded. It was a huge fight. Felicity said she was sabotaging Clara's development, compromising her immune system." Elena nodded slowly. The pattern was clear. "And this baby outfit?" "I don't know. I don't recognize it." He seemed genuinely confused. The phone rang one more time. Edward answered, listening in silence. His face lost its color as Regina spoke. "Thank you, Regina. No, don't tell anyone. When he hung up, he looked like a different man, as if something fundamental had broken inside him. "I need you to stay with Clara," he said to Eleanor, his voice mechanical. "I have to take care of something. It's urgent." "Mr. Vance, what's happening? What did Regina find?" He paused at the door, looking at his daughter, who was now sleeping, clutching the shabby rabbit. "The truth," he answered simply, and left. Elena stayed with Clara for the rest of the day. The girl alternated between moments of consciousness and long periods of sleep. When awake, she accepted sips of water and later a little soup that Elena got from the nurses. Small progress that filled her heart with hope. In the late afternoon, the room door opened. Elena expected to see Edward, but it was Felicity who entered, impeccable as always, carrying a designer handbag and a phone in her hand. "What are you doing here?" The tone was icy, her blue eyes burning with fury. Elena stood up, maintaining her composure. "Mr. Vance asked me to stay with Clara. She's better. She had some soup." Felicity looked at her daughter, noticing the stuffed rabbit. Her face twisted into an expression of disgust. "Where did that filthy thing come from? That's a health hazard. Dust mites, bacteria." She tried to snatch the toy away, but Clara, even drowsy, clung to it with surprising strength. "Please," Eleanor intervened. "It's important to her." "You don't know anything about my daughter." Felicity turned to her, her voice low and menacing. "Wasn't getting fired enough? Wasn't nearly killing her with those cookies full of preservatives enough? What was Edward thinking bringing you here?" "Maybe he was thinking about his daughter's recovery," Elena replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Clara was dying of sadness, Mrs. Vance, not from gluten or sugar." Felicity took a threatening step forward. "Who do you think you are? Some cleaning lady from the inner city trying to give me lessons on motherhood? I have millions of followers who trust me to. To what? To use a child as an accessory in your perfect photos?" Felicity's hand rose, ready to slap, but stopped mid-air. Behind her, Edward had entered the room, accompanied by a woman in her late 60s, with grey hair and a face marked by time. Clara's eyes, which had seemed closed, opened immediately. "Grandma!" The word escaped the girl's lips, clear and strong, surprising everyone. The elderly woman brought her hands to her face, tears instantly streaming down her cheeks. "My love," she whispered, approaching the bed. Felicity stood between them. "What is the meaning of this, Edward? What is this woman doing here?" "This woman," Edward replied with a dangerous calm, "is Constance Miller, mother of Daniel Miller." He paused significantly. "You remember Daniel, don't you, Felicity? Your personal trainer during those 6 months before Clara was born." All the color drained from Felicity's face. "Edward, you're delusional. This is the truth, finally." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I always trusted you, Felicity. When you said we needed fertility treatments, I believed you. When you suggested I had a low sperm count, I accepted it. I never questioned why our daughter didn't look like me." Elena felt like she was witnessing something she shouldn't. She took a step toward the door, but Edward stopped her with a gesture. "Stay, please. Clara needs you." Felicity looked frantically, from Edward to Constance, calculating her options. "This is insane. You're being manipulated. This old woman probably wants money, and this," she pointed to Elena, "this opportunist is conspiring with her." "I have the DNA tests," Edward said, opening the envelope. "I found the real test you hid from me 3 years ago, and I had another one done yesterday. Clara is not my biological daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Felicity looked like a statue, as if processing her options. "It was a mistake," she finally said, her voice now calculatedly broken. "I was confused. We were having problems. You were traveling so much." "Spare me," Edward cut her off. "It's not about the affair. It's about the lie. Years of lies, and about how you treated our daughter. Yes, ours, because blood doesn't define fatherhood. Like a project, a brand, an accessory for your social media." He turned to Constance. "Mrs. Miller found out the truth by chance. A very strong family resemblance between Clara and photos of Daniel as a child. When she questioned you, she was fired immediately, wasn't she? With a non-disclosure agreement and threats." The elderly woman nodded, tears still streaming. "I just wanted to see my granddaughter. Daniel died last year in an accident. He never knew about Clara." Felicity quickly regained her composure. Years of practice in online crisis management were useful in real life too. "Well, what do you plan to do, Edward? Destroy our family? Expose our daughter to scandal? Think about what this will do to your stocks, to your image." Edward laughed humorlessly. "Always about image, isn't it? Clara almost died, Felicity. Her daughter was disappearing before our eyes because she couldn't just be a normal child. She had to be your mannequin, your project, your product." He turned to Elena. "I found out more. Constance wasn't the only one. There were other nannies, other employees who tried to warn us about Clara's emotional state. All fired, all silenced." Felicity grabbed her phone, her fingers moving quickly. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is absurd. Call whoever you want. Custody of Clara will no longer be shared, and you will no longer use her as content for your platforms." Felicity's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Edward. I can destroy you on the internet in a day. Your company, your reputation." As the adults argued, Clara began to cry softly. Elena went to her, taking her small hand. "It's okay, sweetie. It's going to be okay." Edward noticed his daughter's distress and immediately changed his tone. "We'll continue this conversation elsewhere. Eleanor, can you stay with her? Mrs. Miller will stay too. Clara needs peace." Felicity looked ready to protest, but something in Edward's determined gaze made her back down. With one last furious look at everyone, she left the room, already on the phone. When the door closed, Clara held out her arms to Constance. The woman sat next to her granddaughter, hugging her as if to make up for all the lost time. "My bunny," Clara said, her voice stronger than Elena had ever heard it. "Grandma gave it to me." "Yes, my love," Constance confirmed through her tears. "It was the first gift I ever gave you." Elena watched the scene, moved. Edward approached her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on her, for seeing what I couldn't see." "Anyone would have seen it if they had really looked," she replied without censure in her voice. "Children need love, not diets and rules." Edward nodded, absorbing the simple truth of her words. "What's going to happen now?" Elena asked. "A war," he replied, looking at the door through which Felicity had left. "She won't give up easily. She has too much to lose. Million-dollar contracts influence a follower base that will buy anything she sells. And now you're threatening to expose the fraud behind the perfect facade. Exactly. Edward looked tired but determined. It won't be pretty, but Clara deserves a real childhood, not a role in a soap opera about perfect motherhood. The next day, the bomb dropped. An investigative journalist, Mariana Torres, presented a special report on a major national TV network, The Hidden Face of Digital Motherhood, the Felicity Vance case. The report was meticulous, devastating. Former employees spoke anonymously about Felicity's coldness toward her daughter when the cameras were off. Nutritionists questioned the extremely restrictive diet imposed on a developing child. Constance's testimony about being forced away from her granddaughter. And most explosively, the revelation of Clara's true paternity, with Edward appearing as the man who chose to be a father, regardless of blood ties. Social media, which days before had condemned Elena, now turned against Felicity. The fall of the Queen of Digital Motherhood was swift and brutal. Sponsors broke contracts. Followers disappeared by the millions. The empire built on filtered images crumbled under the weight of the raw truth. In the hospital, oblivious to the storm brewing outside, Clara improved visibly. She ate with appetite, spoke more and more, and smiled at Constance and Elena. She even allowed Edward to read her stories, a ritual that, he admitted with shame, he rarely had time for before. How could I have been so blind? He asked Elena, as they watched Clara sleeping peacefully, the stuffed rabbit held firmly in her arms. How did I not see my own daughter fading away? It's easy to get lost, she replied gently, especially when we believe we're on the right path. Edward looked at her with new eyes. He now saw not just the woman who had saved his daughter, but someone whose wisdom came not from degrees or status, but from real life, the life that he, in his bubble of privilege, barely knew. Elena, he began hesitantly, when Clara is discharged, I would like you to remain a part of her life. Not as an employee, but as a friend. Someone she trusts who understands her. I have my own children, my own life, she replied cautiously. I know, and I respect that. But maybe we can find a middle ground, something that benefits everyone. Before they could elaborate, the door opened. A court officer entered, accompanied by Felicity's lawyer. Mr. Edward Vance, I have a court summons. Your wife is filing for sole custody of Clara Vance, citing parental alienation and defamation. The war, as Edward had predicted, was just beginning. And at its center was a 2-year-old girl who just wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she represented on the screens of millions of cell phones. Chapter 3. New Beginnings. The Stanley Mosque Courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was buzzing that Tuesday morning. Journalists crowded the steps, photographers pushed for a better angle, and onlookers craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the protagonists in what the media was calling the trial of the year. Inside, in the hallway leading to Family Court Department 3, Elena waited, uncomfortable in her only formal dress, bought especially for the occasion. Nervous? Asked Camila Mendez, the young lawyer Edward had hired to represent Elena in the proceedings. Scared to death, she admitted, trying to control the tremor in her hands. I never thought I'd be involved in something like this. A month had passed since the scandal erupted, a month of legal battles, public accusations, and an unprecedented media war. Felicity had hired one of the most powerful law firms in the country and a PR team that worked tirelessly to rebuild her image. The narrative they were now trying to sell was that of a devoted mother, a victim of a vengeful husband and a conspiracy to destroy her. Edward, on the other hand, had chosen a different path. He refused to give interviews, kept Clara shielded from exposure, and focused all his energy on the custody case. He hired an experienced but discreet legal team, led by a lawyer specializing in children's rights. Remember, Camilla said, adjusting Elena's collar, you're just a witness. You don't have to worry about complex legal issues. Just tell the truth about what you saw, what you experienced. The judge needs to understand what was happening in that house. The courtroom door opened. A bailiff called the next case. It was time. The inside of the room was solemn, dominated by dark wood and the symbol of justice above the judge's bench. On one side, Felicity sat impeccably dressed, her perfect makeup hiding her fatigue, accompanied by 3 lawyers in expensive suits. On the other side, Edward, with deep dark circles but a determined posture, sat next to his lawyer. Between them, like an unbridgeable chasm, lay the truth about Clara. The judge, the Honorable Helen Carter, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression and attentive eyes, presided over the session. Eleanor was called as the first witness of the day. On shaky legs, she walked to the indicated chair, took the oath and sat down. From where she sat, she could see Felicity staring at her with a mixture of contempt and anger. Edward, in contrast, offered her an encouraging smile. "Ms. Elena Rodriguez," the judge began, "you worked at the Vance residence for how long exactly?" "For only 5 days, Your Honor. A very short period," the judge noted. "However, you have become a central figure in this case. Can you tell us in your own words what you observed during those 5 days regarding the minor Clara Vance?" Elena took a deep breath and began her account. She spoke of the silence in the mansion, of Clara's apathy, of how the girl was treated like an accessory on social media. She described the strict diet imposed, the absence of used toys, the lack of human warmth, and then, her voice cracking, she told them about the cookies, about the first smile, about the first words. Felicity's lawyer stood up, interrupting. "Your Honor, this witness is not qualified to assess nutritional or psychological matters. She is merely a housekeeper with no higher education, making judgments about legitimate parental choices." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, the witness is reporting observed facts, not offering diagnoses, and I would appreciate it if you did not belittle the profession of a housekeeper in my courtroom." She turned back to Elena. "Please continue." With more confidence, she proceeded, describing Felicity's reaction upon discovering that Clara had eaten the cookies, the abrupt dismissal, and subsequently the social media campaign that had turned her into a target of national hatred. "Do you have proof of this campaign?" Edward's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we have here printouts of all the posts made by Mrs. Felicity Vance, including videos and stories where she clearly directs her followers against Elena Rodriguez, without mentioning her name, but with an unmistakable description." The documents were handed to the judge, who examined them carefully, flipping through page after page with an increasingly grave expression. Felicity shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable. "I want to highlight," Edward's lawyer continued, "that these posts resulted in concrete threats to the safety of Ms. Rodriguez and her children. We have here police reports filed after she received hate messages, including death threats." The judge looked over her glasses at Felicity, who was whispering something to her lawyer. "Mrs. Vance," the judge's voice was firm, "are you aware that inciting violence on social media can constitute a crime?" Felicity sat up straight. "Your Honor, I have never incited violence. I merely shared my anguish as a concerned mother. I have no control over my followers' reactions. With 15 million followers and a background in digital marketing, you should understand the power of your words perfectly," the judge retorted, before turning her attention back to Elena. "Please continue your testimony." The questioning continued for over an hour. Felicity's lawyer repeatedly tried to discredit Elena, suggesting she had financial motives for helping Edward, insinuating that the cookies could have indeed been harmful, and questioning her ability to assess a child from a family with cultural standards different from her own. "What do you know about child nutrition?" the lawyer asked in a condescending tone. "Do you have any training in the field?" "No, sir," Elena answered simply. "I have 2 healthy sons who grew up eating the food I prepare. Clara was wasting away on the perfect diet she was following. That is your lay opinion. Mrs. Vance's nutritionists are renowned professionals. With all due respect, sir, nutritionists didn't see Clara crying alone in the dark, hugging a hidden rabbit because not even a stuffed toy was allowed in that house that was too perfect to be real." A murmur went through the room. Eleanor continued, her voice thick with emotion but firm. "I'm not an expert in anything, sir. I'm just a mother. I know what a happy child's eyes look like and what a sad child's look like. Clara was disappearing in front of our eyes. When she ate that cookie and smiled, it wasn't the sugar that took effect. It was the simple act of someone cooking for her with love, of someone seeing her as a child, not as a project. The silence that followed was profound. Even the journalists, trying to discreetly take notes, paused to absorb her words. When she was finally dismissed, Elena felt exhausted but relieved. She had told the truth, without embellishment or exaggeration. Now it was up to the court. Other testimonies followed. Constance, Clara's biological paternal grandmother, tearfully recounted how she was pushed away from her granddaughter. She described the shock of realizing the resemblance between Clara and her late son Daniel, and how Felicity had threatened her when she questioned the paternity. She told me that if I said anything, I would never see my granddaughter again, that she had powerful lawyers who would destroy me. How could I fight that? I'm an elderly woman alone with no resources. Regina, the housekeeper, reported years of observations about the family dynamic. She told of the separate meals. Clara never ate with her parents, always supervised by nannies with strict instructions about every gram of food. She spoke of the room that, despite looking like it was out of a decorating magazine, had no signs of use, play, or life. It was like a movie set, not a child's room, Regina explained. Even the toys were arranged by size and color. Clara wasn't allowed to mess anything up. Medical experts were called to testify. Dr. Paul Mendez, a renowned pediatrician, analyzed Clara's test results. The child showed signs of malnutrition, despite following a theoretically balanced diet. This suggests an emotional component interfering with her ability to absorb nutrients, something we frequently see in children under prolonged stress. Dr. Claudia Fisher, a child psychologist who evaluated Clara after her hospitalization, was categorical. Clara exhibits signs of trauma from emotional deprivation. Her silence was not a medical condition, but a defense mechanism. She had learned that her emotional needs would not be met, so she stopped expressing them. When asked about the improvement after eating the cookies, the psychologist explained, it wasn't the cookies themselves, but what they represented, an act of genuine connection, of affection without demands for performance or perfection. Ms. Rodriguez offered Clara something she desperately needed, authentic emotional presence. On the third day of hearings, Felicity herself was called to testify, dressed in studied sobriety. Without the excessive glamour of her social media presence, she tried to present the image of a dedicated and misunderstood mother. I always did what was best for my daughter, she declared, her voice trained to show controlled emotion. The dietary choices, the care, everything was designed to ensure her full development. If I erred, it was out of an excess of caution, never out of neglect. When questioned about Clara's exposure on social media, Felicity feigned discreet tears. I was just sharing our happiness. What's wrong with showing the world how much we love our daughter? It was then that Edward's lawyer presented a detailed report of all posts involving Clara. Over 3,000 publications in 2 years, almost daily exposure, always carefully produced. Mrs. Vance, the lawyer asked, how many of these photos show Clara looking messy, crying, having a tantrum like any normal child, or do they only show the version you deemed suitable for your personal brand? Felicity hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. Naturally, we chose the best moments to share. And what about the advertising contracts? It's on record that Clara participated in more than 50 campaigns for children's brands before she even turned 2. Is that correct? Yes, but always with all the proper authorizations and care. How much did you receive for these contracts approximately? Felicity shifted in her chair, tense. I don't see how that's relevant to the case. The judge intervened. It is relevant, Mrs. Vance. Please answer. Approximately $4 million, Felicity admitted in a low voice. A murmur swept through the room. The lawyer continued. And were these funds deposited into a trust account for Clara's future or into your personal accounts? Felicity's silence was answer enough. Then, on the third day of hearings, came the moment no one expected. The judge requested Clara's presence, not for formal testimony, obviously, but for a conversation in her chambers, with only a court-appointed psychologist present. When the door closed, leaving little Clara alone with the judge, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Edward looked on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Felicity maintained her composure, but her fingers drummed incessantly on the table. Eleanor, seated in the public gallery, prayed quietly. 20 minutes later, the door opened. Clara came out holding the psychologist's hand, and in her other arm she clutched the stuffed rabbit. Her eyes scanned the room until they found Eleanor. With a small smile, she waved at her. A simple gesture, but it said everything. Then she looked at Edward and ran towards him, received with a tight hug. For Felicity there was only a hesitant glance before she hid her face in her father's shoulder. The judge's decision came the following week. After reviewing the psychological reports, testimonies and evidence, the courtroom was even more crowded, with journalists trying to discreetly take photos through the doors. In cases like this, Judge Carter began, adjusting her reading glasses, there are no winners. There is only the best interest of a child who deserves to grow up in a healthy, loving and stable environment. She paused, looking directly at Edward and Felicity. Clara Vance shows clear signs of prolonged emotional stress. The psychological reports indicate that she developed worrying defense mechanisms for such a young child, including emotional withdrawal and selective eating as a form of control. The judge flipped through some documents before continuing. The issue of biological paternity, while relevant to understanding the family context, is not determinative for my decision. Mr. Edward Vance has demonstrated, through his actions, that he has fully assumed the role of a father, regardless of genetic ties. The law recognizes socio-affective parenthood as being just as valid as biological parenthood. She paused, her eyes briefly turning to Eleanor. This court also recognizes the fundamental role of Ms. Elena Rodriguez in bringing Clara's situation to light. Her testimony and her actions reveal a sensitivity and an understanding of children's emotional needs that are exemplary. Felicity fidgeted in her chair while her lawyer scribbled furiously. Considering all the evidence presented, this court determines that primary physical custody of Clara Vance shall be granted to Mr. Edward Vance, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Felicity Vance, initially once a week, with a re-evaluation after 6 months of family therapy. A buzz went through the room. Felicity turned visibly pale. Additionally, the judge continued, this court issues a restraining order prohibiting any exposure of Clara Vance on social media, television programs, or any other media by either party until the minor turns 18 or is legally able to consent. Felicity's lawyer immediately stood up. Your Honor, we will appeal this decision. My client is a dedicated mother whose career— Your client, the judge interrupted, prioritized her career over the emotional well-being of her daughter, and this court prioritizes Clara. The decision is final. The judge added, this court also orders that Mrs. Felicity Vance shall attend individual therapy, in addition to family therapy, as a condition for the re-evaluation of visitation. I strongly recommend that you reflect on the true meaning of motherhood, beyond the appearances you so carefully cultivate. When everyone stood, Felicity passed by Elena, stopping briefly beside her. This isn't over, she whispered, before being surrounded by her lawyers and escorted out. Edward approached Elena, his eyes red from crying but a genuine smile on his face. Thank you, he said simply. Without you. Clara was always there, she replied, moved. She just needed someone to really see her. As they left the courthouse, a crowd was waiting. Journalists vied for statements, flashes went off. Edward shielded Elena, guiding her quickly to a waiting car. Inside, Clara was waiting with Regina, hugging her inseparable rabbit. Ellie, the girl exclaimed upon seeing her, holding out her arms. Elena hugged her, feeling the small warm body against hers. Hi, Princess, you okay? Clara nodded. Daddy said we're going to a new house, away from the cameras. That's right, Edward confirmed. No more magazine mansion. Clara deserves a real home. 3 months had passed since the trial. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Elena arrived at Edward and Clara's new address, no longer the ostentatious mansion in Calabasas, but a spacious and welcoming house in Pasadena, with a garden where flowers and a small vegetable patch now grew. Her sons Peter and James ran ahead of her, excited for another day of play with Clara. Since the end of the trial, Edward had insisted that Elena maintain regular contact with his daughter, inviting her and the boys for frequent visits. What had started as a bridge to help Clara adapt to her new life had blossomed into a genuine friendship between the two families. Regina opened the door no longer as a formal housekeeper, but as a sort of surrogate grandmother to Clara. They're out back, she informed them with a smile. Clara is trying to teach Edward how to plant tomatoes. It's quite a scene. Elena found them in the small garden. Clara, wearing a straw hat too big for her small head, was giving her father serious instructions on how to dig holes in the dirt. Edward, kneeling on the ground, his jeans stained with soil and a smile on his face, followed every instruction with total dedication. "Deeper, Daddy, or the little tomato won't have any roots." "Like this, Professor?" Edward dug, exaggerating his movements to make his daughter laugh. "Clara, the tomato expert," Elena announced, approaching. "I've learned something new today." The little girl turned, her face lighting up. "Ellie!" She ran to hug her, getting dirt on her dress, and no one cared. Peter and James joined them, already asking where they could plant their own seedlings. "Did you bring the book?" Clara asked, looking hopefully at Eleanor's bag. "Of course, I'd never forget." She pulled out the worn recipe notebook, now with a few new pages added. "Today we're making carrot cake," Clara finished, jumping with joy. "With chocolate frosting," Edward added, standing up and wiping his hands on his pants. His face had a peace that wasn't there before. "If the chef allows it, of course." Elena smiled. "The chef allows it. But first, we need helpers to wash the carrots." The children ran inside, arguing over who would be the best carrot washer in the world. Edward and Elena stayed behind, watching them with that look only parents understand, a mixture of pride, love, and relief at seeing them simply being kids. "How was the visit with Felicity yesterday?" Elena asked as they walked slowly towards the house. Edward sighed. "Better than the previous ones. She brought a book to read to Clara instead of expensive gifts. It's progress." Felicity had appealed the decision, but the court had upheld Edward's custody. After months of negative exposure and lost contracts, her career as an influencer was practically over. Surprisingly, this seemed to have had a positive effect. Forced away from the cameras, she was finally facing her own demons in therapy. "She showed up without makeup," Edward continued, still sounding surprised. "Natural hair, simple clothes. Clara didn't recognize her at first." "And how did it go?" "Awkward at first. Felicity doesn't know how to talk to a child without performing for a video, but then Clara spilled juice on her clothes, and instead of freaking out like before, Felicity just cleaned it up. No drama. It was a small moment, but a significant one." "The family therapist says there's hope," Edward continued. "Felicity has a lot of work to do, but for the first time, she seems to be really looking at Clara as a person, not as an extension of herself." In the kitchen, the children were already organizing the ingredients under Regina's caring supervision. Clara's stuffed rabbit, now clean but still delightfully worn, watched over everything from its place of honor on a special little chair. "Ellie," Edward touched her arm lightly, stopping her before she joined the children. "I need to tell you something." Elena looked at him, curious. In recent months, their relationship had transformed into a solid friendship, based on mutual respect and a shared love for Clara. But there was something different in his eyes today. "Remember the idea I had right after the trial, about using some of the money I saved from selling the mansion for something meaningful? The Children's Foundation?" Edward nodded, excited. "It's ready. Registered with a board of directors, a leased headquarters, the Voice Project, a support center for children in situations of emotional vulnerability." "Edward, that's wonderful. And I want you to run it." Elena froze. "Me? But I don't have the training, the administrative experience, none of that." "You have everything that matters," he replied, taking her hands. "Intuition, compassion, courage. You can continue your studies. We'll pay for your college. But I want someone who sees the children for who they really are, not just through protocols and theories." Before Elena could answer, Clara shouted from the kitchen, "Ellie, the carrots are escaping." They both laughed, the moment interrupted, but the offer hanging in the air like a promise. The following week, Elena visited the space for the Voice Project for the first time. It was an old house in Silver Lake, renovated to house-play therapy rooms, a community kitchen, a library, and a garden where children could plant and harvest, an idea inspired by Clara's new passion. As Edward showed her the facilities, Elena felt a mix of excitement and fear. Her life had changed so much in such a short time. From a cleaning lady struggling to pay bills to the potential director of a foundation, from a national villain on social media to an example of integrity celebrated in special reports. Each room was designed to serve children in different situations, Edward explained as they toured the site. Here we'll have free psychological counseling, here art therapy classes, in this space guidance for parents and caregivers. You've thought of everything, Elena commented, impressed. Actually, Clara helped plan it. We asked her what she thought children like her needed. Her answers were surprisingly profound. What did she say? Edward smiled, recalling. She said, kids need places where they can be loud and nobody gets mad, where they can get their hands dirty, where grown-ups really listen, not just pretend to listen while looking at their phones. Elena felt her eyes well up. That was exactly it. What do you think? Edward asked after the full tour. It's perfect, she answered honestly, but I still don't know if I'm the right person to lead this. Maybe this will help you decide. Edward led her to a room they hadn't visited yet. When he opened the door, Eleanor saw an educational kitchen, equipped for children's cooking classes. Constance is going to teach traditional Southern home cooking here, Edward explained. Regina will teach home organization to teenagers. And here, he pointed to an empty bookshelf, is where we hope to put copies of this. He handed her a newly printed book. On the cover was a colorful illustration of butter cookies and the title, Recipes to Heal the Soul, Food, Affection and Memories by Elena Rodriguez. You. She took the book with trembling hands. How? Clara and I transcribed all the recipes from your mother's notebook, along with the stories you tell while you cook. It's the first project of the voice, to show how food is more than nutrition, it's connection. Eleanor opened the book, seeing her mother's recipes, her own additions, and small illustrations by Clara in the margins. Her eyes filled with tears. What would Mama Rose think of this, she murmured, running her fingers over the pages. Her recipes shared with so many families. I think she'd be proud, Edward said softly, continuing what she started, bringing comfort across generations. There's one more surprise, Edward said, leading her to a frame on the wall. It was the deed to a house in the same neighborhood, just a few blocks away. For you and the boys, close enough to walk to work, far enough to have your own life. Edward, I can't accept. It's not a gift, he interrupted gently. It's an investment in the project's future. The director needs to live nearby, don't you think? Besides, Clara would be devastated if you refused. She's already planning the boys' room decor. Elena shook her head, surrendering. You two are impossible, you know that. We're persistent, he corrected with a smile. We learned from the best. That night, Elena had a long talk with her sons about the proposed move. James, the older and more cautious one, had questions. Will we not see our school friends anymore? And will Grandma be able to visit us there? Yes, sweetie. Grandma can visit, and we can come back to see your friends on weekends. Besides, you have a new friend now, right? Clara? Peter, the youngest, was more excited. Will we have our own room? And can we plant tomatoes too? Yes, we'll have our own little patch to plant. And best of all, you won't have to go to after-school care anymore. I'll be working close to home. Thinking about it, being there to pick up her sons from school, help with homework, have quality time without the exhaustion of hours on public transport, was a dream Elena had never imagined possible. On Sunday, to celebrate the decision, they went to see the new house. It was an older but well-maintained building with 3 bedrooms, a small but cozy backyard, and, to the boys' delight, a mango tree laden with fruit. Is it ours? James asked, still in disbelief. It's ours, Elena confirmed, watching her sons run through the yard, discovering every corner, already making plans. Edward and Clara arrived shortly after, bringing an impromptu picnic. While the children played under the mango tree, Edward and Elena sat on the porch. Are you sure about this? She asked, still hesitant. It's a huge responsibility. I don't want to disappoint you or Clara or the children who will be counting on us. Edward shook his head. Helly, you know what I've learned from all of this? That the most capable people are often the ones who doubt their own abilities. You saw what no one else saw, did what no one else would do, and risked everything for a child you barely knew. That's exactly the kind of courage the Voice Project needs. The following weekend, a small party was held to celebrate Clara's 3rd birthday and the official launch of the Voice Project. The garden of Edward's new house was decorated with colorful balloons, and a simple table offered homemade cake, sweets, and, of course, the famous butter cookies. Clara ran across the lawn with Peter and James dressed as a superhero. Constance chatted animatedly with Regina about which recipes they would teach first. A few journalists, carefully selected for their ethics, discreetly documented the event for a special report on the project. Families from the neighborhood had been invited, bringing other children to see the space that would soon be open to the community. In the center of the garden, a simple sign announced, "The Voice Project, where every child is heard." Elena, wearing a new blouse bought for the occasion, moved among the guests, still getting used to her new role. A reporter approached, asking for an interview. "Do you consider yourself a hero? You saved a child, exposed a difficult truth, and now you're leading an innovative social project." Elena smiled, shaking her head. "I'm no hero. I'm just someone who knows that sometimes what a child needs isn't expensive things or perfect Instagram lives. Sometimes it's just a cookie made with love, and someone who looks them in the eye and asks, 'How are you really feeling?'" To everyone's surprise, Felicity arrived, carrying a simple gift wrapped in colorful paper. She looked different. Shorter, natural hair without the artificial blonde highlights, discreet makeup, comfortable clothes instead of her previously produced look. She approached the group timidly. "Can I stay for a little while?" she asked Edward, her voice uncertain, so different from the confident influencer she had been. "Of course," he replied, motioning for her to join them. "Clara will be happy to see you." Elena watched from a distance as Clara noticed her mother. The girl hesitated for a moment, then ran towards her, stopping at a safe distance. Felicity knelt, getting down to her daughter's level, and offered the gift. "Happy birthday, my love," she said softly. Clara carefully opened the package. It was a simple storybook, nothing extravagant. She flipped through it and smiled. "Thank you, Mommy." There wasn't the hug Felicity had clearly hoped for, but there was a beginning, a small bridge being rebuilt with patience and respect. Later, as Felicity approached the food table, she found herself face to face with Eleanor for the first time since the trial. The moment was tense. "Thank you for letting me come," Felicity said, surprising Elena with the sincerity in her voice. "I know you would have had reasons not to want me here." "Clara needs her mother," Eleanor replied simply. "A real version of her, not the persona you created." Felicity nodded, looking at her daughter playing in the distance. "I'm learning. It's hard. I spent so much time being someone else that sometimes I don't know who I really am anymore." She hesitated, then added, "My therapist says I need to apologize to you for what I did, the lies, the social media exposure." "And do you want to?" "I want to try to be better," Felicity replied, avoiding the direct question. For Clara, it was a start, small, imperfect, but real, as life often is. As the sun began to set, Edward gathered everyone for a toast. Clara insisted that Elena stand by her side, holding her hand. Constance, Regina, the boys, and even Felicity, keeping a respectful distance, formed a circle. "To the Voice Project," Edward said, raising his glass, "and to the many children who will find here what Clara found thanks to Elena, someone who listens to what they cannot say with words." "To the butter cookies," Clara added, making everyone laugh. "And to family," Eleanor completed, looking at her sons, at Clara, at Edward, and even at Felicity, "which isn't defined by blood or by documents, but by who chooses to love and protect, even when it's hard, by who chooses to see beyond appearances and listen to the silences." A journalist documenting the moment asked, "And what's the next step for the project?" Edward and Eleanor exchanged a look. It was she who answered, "We'll start by serving children in the neighborhood, then expand. We'll have workshops on cooking with love, listening spaces, therapy through art and nature. But above all, we want to create a place where children can simply be children, make a mess, explore, make mistakes, and learn without the pressure of being perfect for social media or for adult expectations." A reporter quickly jotted down her words. "Do you consider this a critique of current digital culture?" Eleanor thought before answering. "I consider it a reminder that in a world obsessed with filters and likes, the most revolutionary thing might be to simply be present, truly present for our children." As everyone applauded, a gentle breeze rustled the balloons. Clara approached Felicity again and hesitantly held out a cookie to her. "Want to try? Ellie says they have magic." Felicity took the cookie carefully, as if receiving a precious treasure. "Thank you, Clara." She took a small bite and smiled, not the perfect, rehearsed smile from her photos, but a genuine, imperfect, real smile. "It's delicious," she said with sincerity. Clara nodded, satisfied, and ran back to play with Peter and James. Elena exchanged a look with Edward. They both knew the road ahead would be long, that there would be challenges, that it wouldn't always be easy. But there, in that simple garden, under a sky beginning to show its first stars, there was truth. And the truth, however difficult, however imperfect, was the beginning of everything that mattered. The next morning, Eleanor woke up early, as she always did. But this time it wasn't to catch crowded buses or face an exhausting day of cleaning. It was to calmly make breakfast for her sons, to help them with their backpacks, to walk with them to their new school, just a few blocks away. As she passed the old recipe notebook, now a published book, she felt the invisible presence of her mother. "Am I doing the right thing, Mom?" she whispered into the air. A soft breeze came through the kitchen window, rustling the new curtains, like a nod, an answer, a blessing. Across the city, Clara was also waking up. No longer in the huge, lonely bed of the mansion, but in her new room, decorated with her own drawings, toys scattered on the floor, signs of a genuine childhood, lived without concern for perfection or appearances. "Dad," she called as they had breakfast, "can I bring cookies to the project's opening today?" Edward smiled. "Of course you can. I think every grand opening deserves magic cookies." "They're not really magic," Clara replied seriously. Ellie explained that the magic is the love of the person who makes them. She paused, thoughtful. "But they still make people smile. Isn't that kind of like real magic?" Edward felt his heart warm. "Yes, Clara, that's exactly the kind of magic the world needs." That afternoon, when the Voice Project officially opened its doors to the first group of children from the community, the aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air. In the educational kitchen, Elena, assisted by Clara and other children, explained the recipe that had crossed generations and was now continuing its journey, touching new lives. "The secret isn't in the ingredients," she said as she helped a little girl mix the dough. "It's in the hands that make them, the time we dedicate, the intention behind the gesture." From the corner of the room, Edward watched, marveling at the transformation that a simple act of human connection had unleashed. A life saved, others transformed, a future rewritten, all starting with a worn-out recipe notebook and the courage of a woman who chose to see beyond appearances.